That's exactly what just happened. All right, friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Torah studies. Okay, so this is our deep dive into the parsha, into the Torah portion of the week. Torah portion of the week is bow. Torah portion is bow. Bow, exactly. Bow means come. God says to Moses, at the beginning of the parsha, bow el Pharaoh, come to Pharaoh. And just to give a little background, a little bit of context, what's going on in the story. So here's what's happening. So the Jews have been slaves in Egypt now for about 210 years. And God says to Moses, I want you to be the one to go to Pharaoh, let my people go, and tell him, let my people go. And that's the message. God tells Moses, it's going to take a lot of persuasion. Let's put it that way. It's going to take a lot of persuasion for this Exodus business to actually happen because, as God predicts, God knows, of course, Pharaoh is not going to listen. You're going to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. He's going to say no. You're going to hit him with plagues. He's going to say no. So God says what it's going to take is ultimately, it's going to have to culminate with the death of the firstborn, and tell Pharaoh, he says at the beginning, tell Pharaoh, you're messing around with my firstborn son, Israel. I mean, it's like kind of, a whole nation being called firstborn son, but you're messing with my kid. I'm going to mess with your firstborn. That's the warning that comes at the beginning of the plagues. You're messing with my firstborn. I'm going to get your firstborn. And so the not premonition, but kind of the foreshadowing there is that the Exodus will happen, slavery will end, and Exodus will commence with a plague that strikes the firstborn of the Egyptians, including Pharaoh's own firstborn son. And that's what happens. But right before the 10th plague, so we've had last week we had 7 plagues, this week we have the last 3, but after the first 2 of this week's Torah portion, after plague 8 and 9, plague 8 is the plague of locusts, plague 9 is the plague of darkness. After these 2 plagues, Moses warns Pharaoh about the impending, is that the right word? Yeah, impending plague of the number 10, death of the firstborn. And Moses says to Pharaoh, this is going to be it. This is your last chance. This is your last warning. And Pharaoh basically kicks him out of the room and says, I don't want to see you anymore. The next time I see you, you'll be dead, or whatever it is. Like, basically kicks him out. I don't have anything to do with you, Moses. That's the message from Pharaoh. At this point, interestingly enough, the Torah's narrative stops. And we stop talking about the plagues. And the narrative, just takes a pause, and the Torah tells us about a dialogue that God has with Moses. So understand this. Egypt has been hit by 9 plagues. They've been warned, Pharaoh's been warned, the Egyptians have been warned about plague number 10, which will be the one that devastates Egypt, devastates Pharaoh, his own family, and finally is the straw that breaks the Pharaoh's back to compel him to send the Jewish people out. But the narrative stops. And God turns to Moses and says to Moses, I got a mitzvah for you. I have a mitzvah that I want to tell you. We're ready for the plague. And suddenly, let's have a schmooze. And God says, I'm going to give you a mitzvah. Actually, 2 mitzvahs. Mitzvah number 1, we're going to focus on the first one today. Mitzvah number 1 is the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, which we'll talk about in a second. Mitzvah number 2 is the mitzvah of the Paschal Lamb. So mitzvah number 2 actually makes a little bit of sense because this was supposed to be the Last Supper. This was supposed to be the final meal. This was supposed to be the final meal that the Jews will eat in Egypt. The final meal will be a little bit of roasted lamb. Not so bad, right? A little roasted lamb, right? A little matzah. Okay. All right. Jury's out. And a little bit of herbs, little myrrh, little bit of herbs. No, not matzah soup. I mean, they could have thrown that in as an extra thing, but no. The original instructions, the original menu is the Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, matzah, and the myrrh. Right? I mean, we would call this today a burger with a little spice, little kick to it, little chariv, a little horseradish, right? Get a little kick to it. Horseradishy, that's a good thing, right? Nothing wrong with that. Anyway, so that was on the menu. So that makes sense. If God wants to dictate, also, I'm sorry, one big thing. Huge. God said, when you prepare the Paschal lamb, take the blood from the offering and put it on your doors, that the angel of death, right, will know to pass over, hence the term hence the name Passover, pass over the Jewish homes. Okay, so that's necessary to know before plague number 10. Are you with me? But what's this first mitzvah? First mitzvah is, that I mentioned, the first mitzvah is Rosh Chodesh. God says to Moses, all right, hold on the plagues. The plagues will wait for a little bit. Let's talk about the mitzvah Rosh Chodesh. What is the mitzvah? Why is it here? Lots of questions, but let's see what the Torah actually says. It's only 2 verses. It's pretty short. So let's, I'm going to share my screen. Can I share my screen? I think I can. Yeah, that's a Jewish movie that I may show for the next Jewish summer cinema. It's about this it's about this Orthodox girl who's a weightlifter. Oh, very right. All right. That's an aside. You guys saw that tab up first. Yeah, it's a cool documentary. All right, is this gonna work? I don't know if this is gonna work. Can you guys? All right, let me check in with you guys online. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see all the text width to width? Yes.
I can see the first part of verse 1a.
Aleph and Bet.
It's too big.
And 1 and 2.
I don't know what it is.
Aleph, Bet, 1 and 2.
What?
If you close the view of the participants, you can see the full text.
I wish I could. It usually has a thing.
No,
here.
I mean if individuals just hit the minus little sign on.
I don't know if that's gonna show up on mine. I don't know. You see what I mean?
We can see it now, though. It works.
It does work. All right.
Yes.
Fine. All right. Either way, let's we'll do it and we'll follow along somehow, some way. We'll make it happen. All right. So Ed, if you don't mind, please be nice and loud. Text 1a. This is where we take a break from the plagues and bring you the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. Take.
God spoke to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be to you the head of the months. To you it shall be the first of the months of the year."
So here we go. So Hashem tells Moses and Aaron the following. He says, "HaChodesh alechem Rosh Chodeshim, this month shall be to you the head of months, shall be the first of the months of the year." So I'm going to ask a simple question. It seems very repetitive, right? In this verse 2, the first verse just says who's talking to, but the second verse is where the mitzvah is found. The second verse seems to repeat the same thing twice. And what is it repeating? It seems to be repeating the fact that this month is the first month. Look at the phrase. This month shall be to you the head of the months. To you, it shall be the first of the months of the year. Isn't that the same thing? Are we being redundant? Like, what's going on here? So it seems to be saying that the month that they were in, which is the month of Nisan, is now the first month of the year. Okay, but why say that twice? So the way our sages understand it is that there are actually 2 different mitzvahs. Mitzvah number 1 is Rosh Chodesh. Mitzvah number 2 is Nisan being month number 1. In other words, if you look at the first half, look at the first half of verse number 2, it says, "This month, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim," which don't look at the English translation. I mean, you have to trust me in the Hebrew here. Chodesh hazeh lachem. This Chodesh, this new entity which is referring to the moon, should be for you Rosh Chodeshim, should be the head of the months. In other words, when the moon, as we'll see soon, when the moon looks like this, and Hashem showed Moses what the moon looked like in its initial appearance after it had waned, in its kind of coming back into sight. HaChodesh hazeh, this Chodesh, this new appearance of the moon, should be lachem, should be for you, Rosh Chodeshim, Rosh Chodesh, the head of the months. And then, Rishon hu lachem l'chadshei shana, this month shall be to you the first of the months of the year. In other words, Nisan, in the Torah, the month of Nisan is actually considered to be the first month. The month of Tishrei is actually considered to be the 7th month. So it's a little bit not backwards. It's a little bit different than what we would consider. Our calendar year starts Tishrei. Tishrei 1 is Rosh Hashanah, right? The first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah. So that to us is the first month. The Torah says, God says by the Exodus, no, that this month of Nisan, when Passover is, which we would call the 7th month of the year, is actually month number 1. And so henceforth in Torah, every time it talks about the holidays, month number 1 is Nisan. Month number 7 is Tishrei. It says that Rosh Hashanah is when? The first of the 7th month. Who starts a new year the first day of the 7th month? What kind of Mashiach is that? But that's the way it is. That's the way it is over here in Torah, in biblical understanding. Okay, now, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and then we'll be able to see at least some more of you. So what we have here are 2 mitzvahs. I don't want to get, I want to stay away from confusion because it's a very intricate class. The lesson is absolutely mind-blowing. So I want to make sure that there's clarity over complexity. So what's the clarity? Hashem is telling Moses 2 things. Number 1, how you know when the months begin. How do you know when the Jewish months start? The Jewish calendar will go by the lunar months that follow the lunar cycle. When is the beginning of the month? Here's the instruction. When the moon begins to once again reappear in the sky, that's when Rosh Chodesh is. That's the first lesson from God to Moses. And the second lesson, is that Nisan is the first of the months of the year. Henceforth, in Torah, at least in the Torah's language, Nisan is month number 1. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now, in case it's not clear, we're going to read this inside. Okay, we're going to read this inside. And hold on, there we go. Let's read this inside, and let's see how Rashi describes it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen once again. Let's go here, I guess. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to Rashi. Ed, please read Rashi text 1b.
God said to him, when the moon renews itself, you will have a new month. Moses struggled to determine the precise moment of the renewal of the moon, at what size it should appear before it is fit for sanctification. So God showed him with his finger the moon in the sky and said to him, you must see a moon like this and sanctify the month.
So God tells Moses that the calendar is going to run according to the lunar cycle, and when the moon reappears in the sky, that's when Rosh Chodesh is, and that's the first of the month. And Moses says, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, show me. So God says, all right, it was actually the first of the month. So God took Moses outside and said, look up, pointed with the big old divine finger, so to speak, and said, like this, when you see this, when the moon looks like this, that's Rosh Chodesh, it's the first of the month. So henceforth, Rosh Chodesh is when the moon looks like that, whatever that was. Well, we know what that is. It's when you have that first crescent of the moon after it's disappeared, so to speak. That's when it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay, and that's what God tells Moses, and that henceforth that becomes the way it's done. Now, the way it works today is that we have a calendar, we have a Jewish calendar, and the calendars are set. And if you want to know when Rosh Chodesh is, you just open up a calendar, and it's there. It's marked off. Boom, Rosh Chodesh. It's either 1 day or it's 2 days, whatever it is. It's very clear. It's very clear, and it's formulated. But for hundreds of years, for centuries, for maybe even over 1,000 years, we didn't operate based on a printed calendar. How did the Jewish months get determined? It all happened through eyewitness testimony. So take a look at this, or I don't know, I'm not showing anything, but take a listen at this. Basically, what would happen is on or around the time that Rosh Chodesh should be, so there would be the opportunity for there to be moon sightings. So what would of course happen at night, and the next morning the high court in Jerusalem would be open to take witness testimony. You had to have 2 kosher witnesses that approach the court and say to the court, hey, last night we saw what looked like the appearance of the new moon. And the court would question the witnesses. Where were you standing? Where were you looking? Right? Where were you? What direction were you facing? When you looked up, where was it in the sky? They knew the astronomical, configuration. They knew where the moon should be, and if it was even possible for they knew if it was the right day, the right night, and where it would be. And based on that, the court would be able to ascertain whether or not the witnesses were indeed telling the truth. And if the 2 witnesses testimony, if the testimony of the two witnesses lined up and corroborated and made sense, then the court would say it's done. Now, how often does this happen? How often is there a new moon? So here's what you need to know. The lunar cycle is a little bit more than 29 and a half days. What that means, what I mean by lunar cycle is, the way it works is the moon begins really small in the sky. The way it appears, of course, is very small. Then it gets big, full moon, and then it wanes. It gets smaller, smaller, smaller until it basically disappears, and then it starts again. How long does that cycle take? It takes 29.5, a little bit more than a half, 29 and a little bit more than a half days, which means that some Jewish months are 20. You can't have a month with a half a day. So some Jewish months are 29 days, and some are 30. Okay, that's the way it works. And it's not alternating like, okay, this one's 29, this one's 30, 29, 30. It's based on the molid. When the moon, based on our calculations, again, based on the calendar today, it's when the moon over Jerusalem appears. Like we have the calculations. We know when it's going to happen before it happens, based on astronomical calculations. It's all been done in the 4th century. Hillel II figured this out. He created, for all time the calendar, and it's a formula. It's a mathematical formula following science, and it works, and it's perfect, and there's never been a flaw in it. So that's what we have, and that's how all the calendars work. We have that formula. We've cracked the code. But back in the day, they didn't use the code, even though they knew the calculations, but they did it based on witness testimony. But here's the cool thing about that. The court knew, and I mentioned this parenthetically, let me expand on this. The court knew whether or not it was possible for the witnesses to have seen it. Like if it's only 28 days or whatever it is, then the court knows it's not happening. Even if it's 29 days, right? But it needs an extra half a day. So you're not going to see the moon until the next day or the next night. The math works. If the court knows that it's not possible to see that tonight, then they're not even going to open the next morning for business to take the testimony, in which case they would automatically set Rosh Chodesh after 30 days. Does any of this make sense? I feel like I lost everybody because I'm not explaining it so well. It's always confused you. It's very, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. 1 second. Let me try to state this very clearly. A Jewish month only has 2 options. It could either be 29 days or 30 days. So if based on the calculation, based on the astronomical calculation, if there's no way, and how could this be? It could be. If there's no way that the new moon could appear on the night of the 29th, you know what that means? That means that the 29th is not Rosh Chodesh. Sorry, the night of the 30th. After 29 days. If it cannot appear on the night of the 30th, then that means that the 30th cannot be Rosh Chodesh. That means that it must be the 30th, and the next day is Rosh Chodesh. I feel like I lost everyone again. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is, forget the numbers. Yeah, it only works with if you have a calendar and you work with it. Yeah, it's right. It's printed. But here's what you need to know. I'm not going to say numbers. I'm just going to state the concept, and you can plug it in for yourself or not plug it in for yourself with the numbers. The concept is that there are certain days where it's possible to happen, in which case the court would convene, and certain times it's not even possible, in which case the court wouldn't even bother. You with me on this? It either is possible or it's not possible. If it's not possible, a month can't be more than 30 days. So if it doesn't happen by day, if the new moon doesn't appear on day 30, well, then automatically it's the next day. You don't even need to see it. It automatically happens. The court says it's Rosh Chodesh the next day, and that's it. The only question is if it's a 29 day, if Rosh Chodesh is coming on the 29th day. Oh, I threw a number. Sorry about that. Anyway, the point is that the court will convene when it's possible to see the moon and come a day early or come on that first day. But if not, then it defaults to the second day. Now, all of this is discussed at length in Jewish law. The Rambam Maimonides, who was an astronomer, also added to his list of accomplishments. He talks about this extensively. What I'm going to do, and it's a bit of a longer text, I'm going to read this one, text number 2, and I'm going to throw in a little bit of the halacha on it. This is text 2 from Rambam. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, here's how the Rambam Maimonides describes the process. And if it's not showing up on your screen, my apologies, but see if you can minimize something. I can't touch anything on my computer, on my screen right now, because it's just not letting me. Okay, the High Court says Rambam The high court, says Maimonides, would make calculations in a manner resembling the calculations of the astronomers who know the location of the stars and their paths in their orbits. They, the Jewish high court, would perform careful research to determine whether or not they would be able to sight the moon at the appropriate time, i.e. the 30th night. That's what I mentioned before. Okay, either it is possible or it's not possible. If the judges determined that it was possible to sight the moon on the night of the 30th, which would render that no longer the 30th, but the first of the new month, you with me? Which renders the previous month 29 days. I hope that makes sense, right? If the new moon is seen on day 30, guess what? That's not day 30 anymore. That's day 1, and the previous month now reverts back to 29 days. So, but if the judge determined that it was possible to see the moon on that 30th night, they would sit the next morning waiting for witnesses to come and testify throughout the entire 30th day. If witnesses came and the court examined their testimony according to the law and verified the truth of their statements, the court would sanctify the new month. They would say, oh, surprise, today is Rosh Chodesh, because somebody saw the moon the night before. Okay, so again, I do want to say this. I want to give numbers. So imagine today is day 30. I know it's at night now. Oh, well. Imagine today was day 30. So imagine 9 a.m., the court opens and begins taking testimony. 2 people come in and say, last night we saw the moon, the first crescent of the moon, and the judges examine and cross-examine and check it out and corroborate, and it's kosher, and the judges say the thumbs up it. Guess what? That day is no longer day 30th. You have to take out your eraser, erase the calendar. That is now day number 1 of the new month. Does that make sense? Right? Because they saw. Now, if it's not possible based on their calculations that anyone would have seen it on the night of the 30th, then they don't even open for business. I mean, they open, but not for the cases regarding the moon. They just don't even listen. Okay. Now, if the moon, oh, hold 1 second. So you know what that means? That means that no one knew when Rosh Chodesh was going to be until like middle of the day. You with me? It's like, or till mid-morning or midday. You could go like a few hours in the day and not even know that day was Rosh Chodesh until the court says it's good to go. The court had until until like late afternoon to do it, because back in the day, all you had to do in Rosh Chodesh, not all, but what you had to add on Rosh Chodesh was a sacrifice, was a Rosh Chodesh sacrifice. So as long as they had enough time to bring that, they could sanctify it and call it Rosh Chodesh. Right, today we would be all messed up. Like, am I saying the Hallel in the morning prayer or not? Right. I mean, I need to know first thing in the morning. I need to know, 6, 7 a.m. Am I calling this Rosh Chodesh or not? But back in the day, it was less. I mean, they did what they did. I don't know what they did in prayers, but vis-a-vis the temple, they would be flexible. As soon as the court called it, if they had enough hours in the day, they would do it. If it was too late, they would just push it off to the next day. That's it.
Rabbi Ari.
Yeah.
What if it's so overcast that you can't see the moon?
Oh, great question. And Ed had the same question. If it's overcast, then no dice. You need to have human witnesses. Even though you know that the moon should have been out that night 30 rendering day 30, day 1. If there's no witnesses, no Rosh Chodesh. That's how it works. It's gotta be. Whoa, time out. Back in the day, today we don't do any of this. Today we have a calendar and we're set. But back in the day, when it was based on Re'iyah, based on sight, it had to be seen. It couldn't have been known. It had to be seen. Let's continue with Rambam because it gets very cool. Okay, if the moon was not sighted, and that's what Rambam says right here. If the moon was not sighted for whatever reason, and witnesses did not come, so there's no witnesses because they didn't see the moon because let's say it was cloudy, they would complete the 30th day. In other words, the 30th day would stay day 30, thus making the month full. In other words, month full means it has 30 days. And automatically the next day would be Rosh Chodesh because you can't have a month with 31 days in the Jewish calendar. It's either 29 or 30. So if no moon sighting on night 30, then automatically it's the next day that's Rosh Chodesh. Now, if okay, let's continue. There's not much I can do about this. It is a bit technical. Now, if according to their calculations, the judges knew that it was impossible for the moon to be sighted. So, and this is what I said before several times already. If they know that for whatever reason, and there is a formula for this, but I'm not going to confuse everybody. If the judges know based on astronomy and calculations that there's no way, let's say tonight is night 30. Let's make it easy. Tonight, Wednesday night, is night number 30. Tomorrow would be day 30 unless someone sees the moon tonight, let's say. But let's say they know that no one can see the moon tonight. Why? Because it's not possible. Because they know based on 29 and a half days, it's not going to appear until 10 a.m. You with me what I just said? It's going to appear on day 30, but 10 a.m. day 30, which means tonight at night, you can't see it because it's not going to appear. So that if that's the case, if the judges knew that it's impossible for the moon to be sighted at night, they would just not sit in session on the 30th day back inside. They would not sit in session on the 30th day. They wouldn't convene and open it up for moon sighters. Moonsighters. It's a new, that's what they used to give the t-shirts for the ones that I am a moonsighter for the High Court of Jerusalem, right? They would not, nor would they wait for the arrival of witnesses. They would not sit in session. They would not wait for the witnesses. Now, if witnesses came, we saw the moon, they would know that they were false witnesses, or that clouds appeared to them in a form resembling the moon, but it was not the real moon. In other words, the judges, the rabbis, they knew the astronomical. Look, if Hillel the second in the 4th century was able to figure out a calendar for all time based on these astronomical calculations, you don't think the greatest minds, the High Court of Jerusalem, figured it out? Of course they figured it out. They knew what was going on. So they knew exactly if it was possible or not. So if it was possible, on that night, night 30, for the moon to be seen, the next morning they would convene, they would hear testimony. If they came, boom, it's no longer day 30, it's day 1. If it's not possible, they didn't bother. And the next day, so day 30 stayed day 30, and the next day became Rosh, automatic by default. Now, let's continue. In order, now, because of the importance of setting the Jewish calendar, the judges, the rabbis, Judaism, etc., in general, encouraged people to come forth and testify about the moon. Because without the testimony, you can't really establish it correctly. You're kind of reliant in that system, not today, but in that system, you're reliant on eyewitness testimony. I'm going to continue to read this one. Rambam continues, text 3. There was, page 5, there was a large courtyard in Jerusalem that was called Beit Yazek. All the witnesses coming to testify about the new moon would gather there, and the court would examine them there. So it wasn't like in a small courtroom. It was like a big gathering place, because there would typically be a lot of witnesses who were moonsighters. Okay, they would prepare, listen to this. The court, the judges, whatever, they would prepare great feasts for them so that people would be willing to come. Unbelievable. And I had a babka that I forgot to bring, and I'm thinking about food, and I literally wrote in the email babka, and I had a babka, and I literally left it. And and you should know, for those of you online, there's a lot of tension in the room right now. There's a lot of tension. Kidding. But it's, I now owe 2 babkas next week. It's boiling over. There's a revolt. Tables are being overturned. Listen. Cheesecake. That's the only way. That's the only way to salvage this. The only way to salvage this through cheesecake, maybe. All right. I can't promise for Leah, but I can work on it. Yes, it's a 4-step recipe. Oh, no, this is even easier. This is a hack of all hacks. I'll tell you at the end of the class. Remind me cheesecake recipe. We're going to bonus. We got the moon that maybe look like cheese plus a bonus cheesecake recipe. Now, getting back to the story. So how did they attract people to become witnesses? What they do? They serve food. And that reminded me, whoops, I forgot the food. That was my train of thought. Huh? Thinking, yes. Well, hoping that I would remember. But anyway, they serve food. They would prepare great feasts. They would have food ready for the people. Now let's continue. The pair of witnesses that arrive first would be examined first. So the first 2 in line, first 2 up. All right. They would bring in the greater of the 2 and say to him, I don't know how they determined the greater of the 2, but whatever, whoever looked more reliable. They brought him first for questioning. They said, tell us, how did you see the moon? Was it in front of the sun or behind the sun? Now, mind you, this is at night. So I'm not sure what kind of sun we're talking about, but I guess planetary systems. Where did it look like it was? To its north or its south? How high was the moon over the horizon? In which direction did it tilt? How wide was it? Basically, they would ask them exactly, what did you see? You said you saw the moon. What exactly did you see? All right, let's continue. Then they would bring in his counterpart, the other pair of the other member of the pair of the witnesses and examine him. If their statements match, their testimony would be accepted. Let's continue. Then they asked all the other pairs of witnesses certain general questions, not because they needed additional testimony, but so that the witnesses should not leave disappointed and so that they would be accustomed to come. That clearly the court was incentivized to give people a good time and to make them feel like they were important in this process. And like, you help make the Jewish calendar happen, because if everyone's like, someone else is going to do it, guess what? No one's going to show up. And guess what? We're going to have a problem. Rosh Chodesh is not going to be the right day. So then the head of the court would say it is sanctified. And all the people responded after him, it is sanctified, it's sanctified. Mekudash, Mekudash, it's sanctified. Now what happens? What happens if the court gets it wrong? What happens if the court gets it wrong? What happens if the court, for some reason, what happens if the court, for some reason, makes a mistake? Take a look at text 4b. Okay. Take a look at this. Once the court sanctifies the new month, it remains sanctified regardless of whether they erred unwittingly, or they were led astray by false witnesses, or they were forced to sanctify it. No matter how they made a mistake, if they made a mistake, it still stands. Look at that. Kind of crazy. We are required to calculate the dates of the festivals based on the day that they sanctified as being the new month, even if it's an error. Even if a person knows that the court erred, he is obligated to rely on them for the matters entrusted to them alone. Basically, in Jewish law, the court and the court's proclamation is very important. And it's based on a verse, as we see in text 4c. The one God who commanded us to observe the festivals is the same one who commanded us to rely on them on the court, as implied by the verse, which you will pronounce as days of holy convocation. The holidays are that which are pronounced by whom? By the court. So once the court pronounces it, that makes it the holiday. Or in this case, that makes it Rosh Chodesh. So, and you based, obviously the holidays based on when the month begins. If the holiday is on the 15th, well, you got to know when the 15th is based on day one. So here's what we've discovered up until now. Let me just summarize this. So number one, in the Jewish system, the Jewish calendar system, the months are running in accordance with the moon. The moon dictates when the months begin. The moon dictates when the months begin, based on visual, originally, back in the day, based on visual sighting of the moon and testimony, etc. What happens if the court makes a mistake and they proclaim, let's say, for example, it wasn't possible for the moon to have been seen because, as I said before, the calculation is such that it would not be possible to see at night. But let's say the court somehow missed that. Let's say they messed up and they somehow proclaimed it Rosh Chodesh, that day 30 as Rosh Chodesh, not day 30, but day 1 of the next month. And they messed up. And then they realized their error. It stands. It stays, and that's Rosh Chodesh. Now the question is like this. The question is, so how does that work? How does it make sense? Why does it make sense that if the court makes a mistake, it should still stand? Why don't they undo the mistake? You might say, simple answer might be that, well, look, no system of law is perfect when you're dealing with human judges, right? There's room for error in the court system, as we have our court system today in America. Certainly we have our own issues and many problems that plague our legal system. So it's understandable that any legal system in which you're entrusting the law to human judges, to err is to be human, or to be human is to err, or both, right? But human is error and error is human. So it makes sense that there's going to be error, but we go with it. But that's not really a good answer, because at the end of the day, Torah is trying to get divine law, trying to get God's law right. In America, it's not about God's law. It's about, we came up with the law, so we're going to figure it out and whatever. But if Torah is all about God's law, and it's all about like getting it right, so then if you know that you got it wrong, why not fix it? Why does it go based on the proclamation of the court? If you know that it's wrong, as Rambam says, even if a person knows that the court made a mistake, he's obligated to rely on them. Why? If you know they made a mistake, then call it out and fix it. Why go with the mistake? Doesn't make any sense, right? So I want to share with you a perspective, and it's a very deep perspective, and it's got a lot of implications for our lives. But first, we need to get into a Talmudic debate. The Talmudic debate is between two rabbis regarding the origin of creation. When was the world created? Text number 5. Elio, please read this one. I'm going to share the screen, and let's jump in. Text number 5. The Talmud discusses when the world was created. Take it away, nice and loud, please.
It is taught in Baraisa. Rabbi Eliezer says the world was created in Tishrei. Rabbi Yehoshua says the world was created in Nisan.
So we have a dispute. The Talmud quotes a Braita. Braita is Brisa is it's a text that dates back to the times of the Mishnah. Either way, the Braita teaches that there's a dispute between two rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. These were contemporaries who would always have points of disagreement about matters of Jewish law. It's just what it is. And one says the world was created in Tishrei, and the other one says the world was created in Nisan. Okay. I mean, yeah. By the way, we Rosh Hashanah, we go Tishrei, right? So it seems like we follow Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says no, the world was created in Nisan. Interesting. Okay, so I guess the question is, how do we not know this? Don't we have a tradition? We have two traditions, clearly, but how do we not know this? And how are they arguing over a fact? I mean, it seems like you could argue over a logical, if you have a question of logic, you can have a disagreement about how you're going to see some. But how do you have a question over a fact? The world was either created in Tishrei or Nisan. I know you're saying one rabbi says this, one rabbi says that, but how is there a question about something that should be straightforward? Yeah. How do they know? Good. How do they know? What's the basis? I want to share with you a perspective that's actually brilliant. And the perspective is from Tosfot. I mean, we would know based on some sort of tradition, but the question is, how do we have two different traditions about a fact? So if you have a tradition about a logical understanding, a perspective, okay, different people have different perspectives. But how do you have a difference of opinion about a tradition? It's either Nisan or Tishrei. Anyway, take a look what Tosfot says. Tosfot text number 6. Linda, please read this one. And this is actually very powerful. Take it away, please.
Rabbi Tam said, both opinions are the word of the living God. We can therefore explain that in Nisan, God had the idea to create the world, but it was not actually created until Tishrei. So
the Tosfot, who are Rashi's grandsons, Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam specifically, he had a bunch of grandsons, including Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says like this: both opinions are true. Both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua are true. One says Nisan, one says Tishrei, one says Nisan. Both are true. How could it be? He says, look, the original idea, was born in Nisan, but the world was born in actuality in Tishrei. Are you with me? Imagine somebody starts a company. Imagine somebody launches a company, and you ask them, "Oh, when did you launch the company? When did you launch? When did the company begin?" So they'll say, "Well, I had the idea about the company, or the country, right? I had an idea in 2000." But I didn't actually launch it until 2005. So there's two origin dates, right? There's the origin date in actuality, and then there's the origin date in concept, right? So that's what Rabbeinu Tam says. Rabbeinu Tam says that God conceived of the world. God had the idea to create the world in the month of Nisan. It was only until 6 months later, or whatever it is, till Tishrei, that the world actually was created. So it starts up as an idea, and then it gets built. Good. Conception or birth, right? So when is the... Right, 6 months instead of 9. Exactly. Right, so there's the conception, which is, literally, we would say that conceiving of an idea, right? Conception. And then there's the birth, there's the actual launch of the idea. So in this case, it's the idea of creation, which is not just the idea of, oh, hey, let's create. I have an idea, but it's really about the ideal of creation. Like, why would I create? What's the goal of creation is already conceived of in Nisan. The world is actually created on the ground in Tishrei. So I want to tell you a tale of two creations. This is really what Rabbeinu Tam is really saying on a deeper level is a tale of two creations. There's creation, the way it exists in its ideal form. According to Plato, this would be like the world of ideas, right? Like the ideas or ideal, like the perfect world or the conceptual world, the world of in concept. And then there's the world as it actually is built out, as it actually unfolds, as it's actually created. So you have like the idea behind the world, and then you have the world itself. Or you have, maybe in other terms, you have the purpose of the world, and you have the world itself. So to put it in other terms, you would have like the abstract and concrete. You would have like along the lines of, it would be like the soul and the body. The soul of the world, are you with me on this? The soul of the world is born, so to speak, or emerges. The spirit, the soul, the purpose, the ideal, the concept, all of these are synonymous, is that happens Nisan. The body of the world, the actual creation, the actual nuts and bolts are built in Tishrei. Good. So we have the concept and the concrete. We have the ideal and the real. We have the soul and the body, two different stages. This is true in everything, in every activity. Hopefully, right? First we have a concept, and then we do something to build it out, to bring it into fruition. First it begins as an idea, then it culminates as a thing. That's the way it works. Even when we speak, hopefully we think before we speak. So it begins our words, right? Hopefully, not always. Hopefully, right? No, a lot of times no, but hopefully our words that come out begin as a concept, and that's the soul that drives the body of the words in this context. All right, so what's the point? The point is that the world really has two stages. The world, I know Shakespeare said the world is a stage, all the world is a stage, but the world really has two stages. All right, but I'm bummed. The world has two stages. Stage one is concept. Stage two is action. There's the concept, there's the purpose, there's the ideal of the world, and then there's the concrete building of said world. In other terms, in other words, I'm going to use different words now. We could ask rhetorically, which work represents the purpose of creation? We call that, there's a word for that, 5-letter word. A 5-letter word, 4 letters in Hebrew, that represents the purpose of creation. What is that?
Torah.
Huh?
Torah.
Torah. Good. There you go. Which is what we're doing right now, right? Studying Torah. Torah is the purpose of creation. So it's almost like the Torah of creation, the purpose of creation originates in Nisan, and the creation itself, the actual unfolding of the nuts and bolts and the mechanics, all that happens in Tishrei. So Rosh Hashanah is Tishrei, but like the purpose is Nisan. Now, when we think about this, it might be easy to think of this in terms of like not real and real. So like Nisan is not real yet. It's still abstract, conceptual. It's like the ideal, but it's not yet real until Tishrei, and that's when things matter. That's when things count. But in the Jewish understanding, it really works the other way around. And that is that the most real part of creation is its ideal, is its purpose. And this, which is the manifestation of said purpose, not that it's not real, but it's an outcome, it's an outgrowth, if you will, of what the ideal is. In other words, it's not like you have this, the concrete, and the concrete also has a prior state to it that's abstract and conceptual. No, it works the other way around. Because there's a concept, because there's an ideal, because there's a purpose, that's where it unfolds into what we have here. So this physical reality is driven by the concept. So the real is driven by the ideal, not the other way around. So what's primary on one level? You can look at it both ways, but on one level, we could say that the origin, the conceptual origin is primary. So stated in simpler terms, in much simpler terms, we have a duality of Torah and the natural world around us. We have what the Torah says, which is the ideal, which is the concept, and then we have the way the world actually runs. Yeah. And sometimes, even though Torah, the concept, is driving the world, sometimes it seems like it's not congruent. Huh?
You said the real is driven by the ideal. So the Torah is driving the reality.
Torah is driving reality. This is the way we believe. Torah drives reality. The problem, what I'm saying right now, the problem is, it doesn't always look like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't always look like that, right? It looks like, who's driving the ship anyway? It looks like this is disjointed from its purpose. Yeah.
I thought Hashem drives reality.
Yes, Hashem's driving reality, but Hashem's vision is embodied by Torah. So it's not that Torah is different than Hashem, but it's God's vision that's expressed by Torah is what drives the reality. In the language of, and we may have it here. There's a quote from me a second here. There is a quote from Zohar. Yeah. Text 10, very cool quote. You guys are gonna like this. Yeah, I'm gonna read this quickly. Text 10, look at this one. Anyone who looks into the Torah, look at this. Anyone who looks into the Torah and toils in it is considered to uphold the world's existence. Just as God looked into the Torah to create the world, right? The Torah is the blueprint of creation. A person looks into the Torah and upholds the world. So what we have here are two dynamics, the Nisan dynamic and the Tishrei dynamic, the concept and the concrete, the ideal and the real, the Torah and the world. It's all the same duality. It's all the same yin and yang. Yin and yang, did I get that right? Yin and yang. It's the two sides of the coin, and one is the blueprint and one is the thing. So, and one is the actual culmination. So, for example, when you look at a blueprint, right? So you have a building, let's say the building that we're in right here, or any building wherever you are. So let's say there's a blueprint. So you could learn about your space by looking at the blueprint. Or you can just look at your space and see what there is, but it comes from the blueprint. The blueprint drives the way the space is created, assuming that you followed the way it is. But it's even deeper, it's even deeper than this when it comes to Torah, because Torah is almost constantly creating the world, and the world is unfolding constantly, and it's being driven by this ideal, by this concept, by what God wants, and that's expressed by Torah, but that's what drives the creation of the world itself. So the fabric of existence is driven by Torah. But here, so you would think that everything should be in perfect concert. So what happens when we look at the world and say, this thing looks broken? There's an ideal, there's a divine value. The Torah says, God tells us expectations. You look around the world and it looks nothing like it. So what's going on? Or for that matter, what happens when Torah says, do this and it's going to be good, and we do it and it's not good? What happens? What Torah says, do a mitzvah and you'll get blessed. What happens when you do a mitzvah and things fall apart? What happens then? What happens when it happens, right?
Yeah,
it happens. It's like, oh God, what happened? I prayed. I showed up. I prayed. I did a mitzvah, studied Torah. No, what happened? What, the system's broke? How do you get a breach in the system? So here's the big idea. This is the big idea. And this will answer a question about the moon and about the court and everything. It's all the same. It's all the same discussions you'll see in a second. Because even though the world, creation itself is driven by an ideal, is driven by God, driven by the blueprint of Torah, the reality is that because the world is physical and has concealments of the divine, because of that, there could be glitches. There could be a little bit of a glitch. There could be a glitch. How could there be a glitch? If we live in the world of ideals, there's no glitch because that's God's world. But when it comes out in action, it may not look perfect. For example, you have a blueprint. In a blueprint, everything looks perfect. Go measure the walls here. Yeah? Go measure the walls. Are they perfectly azoi? Are they perfectly straight? Are they a little bit warped, a little bit bent, a little bit short, a half an inch? I've never built anything worth talking about. I mean, sukkah, other than that, but I know some of you in this room have. Am I wrong here? I'm not wrong. Right? Your blueprint is perfect. Yeah? And in actuality, it's a little bit off.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. Now, not that God couldn't have made it perfect also, but then you know what? If it was perfect on that level, then it wouldn't be real. It would still be the blueprint. Are you with me on what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If it was so perfect on the level of divine perfection, then it would still be the blueprint. It would only be a blueprint. There wouldn't be an actual. The definition of actual is that it's not perfect. That's the definition. I hope that makes sense. In other words, the difference between the Nisan perfection and the Nisan conception and the Tishrei creation is the difference between perfection and imperfection. So you have the concept and it's perfect, but in actuality, in real life, it's not 100%. It's maybe 99, maybe 49, whatever it is, but it's not 100%. More or less, it's not 100%. Why? Not that God couldn't have made it perfect, but if he made it perfect, then it would still be the realm of the blueprint. It wouldn't be real. It would still be ideal. We're talking about fine ideas here. I hope everyone's with me on this. Yeah. So okay, good. I'm glad I listen, it's all about finding the right language of expression here. See, look, even in this process, there's the class in my head, right? And then there's a class as it comes out. So it not always the same thing. And then there's the class the way you understand it, which is, everyone understands it their own way, which is probably a third class. So, but let's speak of two, right? So there's a class the way it's here, in the class the way it manifests. And it's not always, not always am I feeling that it's exactly but that's the way it is, because the way it exists in the perfect space it's just not going to be the same in the imperfect space. This is how the Rebbe answers the question of why it is that when the court proclaims it Rosh Chodesh, why it's Rosh Chodesh. But listen to this. There's a twist. Listen to this. Not that the court is imperfect and got it wrong, because if they got it wrong, then fix it. No. It's that when the court proclaims it Rosh Chodesh, that's a sign from on high that was the real Rosh Chodesh. The fact that the moon couldn't have been seen is a glitch in the moon. Are you with me? I'm going to say that one more time. The fact that it's a twist. We're not saying that the courts are wrong because they're human and they're fallible. Then undo it. No, we're trying to say why don't undo it. Because when the court proclaims it, it must have been infused from a spirit on high that aligns with the ideal of Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is supposed to be that day. It's not possible for the moon to be seen because the moon is not perfect. Rosh Chodesh is perfect, but the moon is not always perfect. The moon itself, even though Rosh Chodesh goes by the moon, the message is sometimes the moon is not a perfect representation of when Rosh Chodesh actually is. Are you with me in this huge idea? This is huge. And if I would come up with this, but this is the Rebbe's insight on this. Take a look. I'm going to read this inside. Give me a second. One second. Hold on. 12b. This is it. This will blow your mind if it hasn't already been blown, but this will corroborate the blowing of mind that you may have had. Okay, 12b. Here we go. I'm going to read this. 12b. Look what the Rebbe says. However, when the court sets Rosh Chodesh on a different day, in which case the Torah tells us to nevertheless rely upon them, this itself proves that it is on that day, which the Torah of truth determines to be Rosh Chodesh, when the primary new moon occurs above. In other words, in the spiritual realms, whatever that looks like, it is Rosh Chodesh, and there is a new moon. As for the fact that physically the new moon takes place on a different day, that's because this world is, for various reasons, not fit for the flow of the moon above to be expressed in the moon below at the same time. You know what moon above and moon below means? The theory and the action, or the spiritual and the physical. In other words, it doesn't exactly match up. Why? Because our world, the world of things, is flawed. It's like it very much evokes the philosophy of the Platonic forms. You know what Plato says about Platonic forms? You have like a tree. He says, I'm looking around the shul here, we have trees. I mean, but you could call it a tree, right? So Plato argues, he says, one second. You call this a tree? Yeah. And that a tree? Yeah. And the thing outside a tree? Yeah. All trees? Yeah. How's that possible? They're all different things. They look different. How can they all be trees? So he says, it must be that there is a perfect form of tree upon which everything else is measured. And although it's not exactly perfect tree, but it's close enough to be called tree, but tree is a one tree that's the perfect tree, which who knows what that looks like, and everything else is similar to that, close enough, we'll call it tree. That's what he says. Now, it sounds like who cares? But it's philosophy. So that's the whole thing of philosophy. You kind of think about things, but this is really not that far off. And I would say this is obviously an origin of that, but here's the point. The point is that there is a perfect form of Rosh Chodesh, when that's supposed to be, when that is. There's a moon above, right? The Rebbe says there's a flow of the moon above. There's a way the moon moves in its perfect state, and then there's the way it moves down here. And more or less it's accurate, but it's not 100%. It's not 100%. So when there's a glitch, when it's a little bit off, that's what happens. The court, that's what it looks like when the court proclaims this day to be Rosh Chodesh, when the physical moon was not actually appearing. And we say we don't undo the proclamation. Why not undo it? Because spiritually they got it right. That's the power of the Beis Din. The power of the Jewish High Court in Jerusalem is such that God guides, this is our belief, that God guided them, even in error, to align with the way it is above, even though it's not manifest and reflected below. And the reason why it's not manifest and reflected below is because there's a bit of a disconnect between the spiritual form, moon, and the physical actual moon. Between the spiritual orbit, not orbit, but the spiritual cycle of the moon and the physical cycle of the moon, there's a bit of an incongruency. There's a bit of a disconnect, a bit of a gap, a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like, on Zoom, when people try to sing together, you ever hear what that sounds like? Yeah, right. It's a balagan. Why? Because there's a delay. There's a delay. Everyone's got a bit of a different delay. And it could be like a point, whatever second, a millisecond, but it's enough to throw off harmony. And so the same thing is true with the world. The world, by definition, there's perfection, but this world is a little bit, imperfect. If it was perfection, then it wouldn't be the world. By definition, the world means imperfection. And it's not a flaw in God, it's just the reality of the world. And thus, the moon is not always going to get it right. The moon, that's the point. The court got it right, the moon didn't get it right. That's the message. And there's a beautiful takeaway, which I'll get to in a second, but let's clarify first. Yeah, Linda, what were you going to say?
So why would God create an imperfect world? Because if it was perfect, then it would be like.
Then it'll be too close, and then what's the point? Like, why? Then what are we doing here? The whole point is, you know what the point is? To align ourselves, to be in that imperfect space and to perfect ourselves, that we should do the work. If it's already automatically perfect, then what's the point? So everything in nature is going to have that imperfection, even the moon. So sometimes, even though it's supposed to be Rosh Chodesh above, the moon, the moon won't be born at the right time. And that's a flaw in the moon. That's not a flaw in the court. That's the big idea here. So when the court makes them seemingly erroneously proclaims that day as Rosh Chodesh, and they got, based on astronomical calculation, they got it wrong, we say, no, it's the Rosh Chodesh. Why? The way the Rabbi understands it, because it means that above, in its perfect form, that's when Rosh Chodesh was supposed to be. And it's just that the moon is a little bit flawed. Now, I get it that this is a bit of a tricky concept. I don't mean tricky. I mean, I get it's a bit, it sounds like kind of like maybe like this, like the court didn't get it wrong, the moon got it wrong, because I get it, but I think it's a beautiful concept. And here's really the takeaway. And I alluded to it before, but let me express it now. Because all of this is wonderful to know about the moon and how things worked when there was a court that determined Rosh Chodesh based on eyewitness testimony. But honestly, we have a calendar now, and we don't do eyewitness testimony anyway. So it's really a moot point that this whole process doesn't apply right now. So then what's the point? So here's an idea to think about. And again, I mentioned this before. I parenthetical. What happens? What happens when we do the mitzvah and we're waiting for the big light? We're waiting for the reward. We're waiting for the jackpot, right? We pull the mitzvah lever, 777 or 770, 613, whatever. Boom. Where's the gold? Where are the chips? Right? How come it doesn't happen? And the answer is because there's the ideal, and then there's the imperfect world. There's the divine ideal, and then there's the imperfect world. And it doesn't always translate, but it doesn't mean that it's not working, or it doesn't mean that it's not holy. It doesn't mean that it's not spiritual. So just because we don't see it immediately manifest is a product of the imperfection of our reality, but it should not be a point to, or something that totally dissuades us from doing the work that we need to do. Linda, what were we going to say?
Should you do a mitzvah only to receive the reward?
No, Linda's asking a good question. Should you do a mitzvah to get something from it? No. The ideally, no. Right. But we're imperfect human beings. We've been discussing. So sometimes we have an agenda. Sometimes we say to God, listen, I really need this. I'm willing to do X, Y, and Z because I really need this. Right? Like I'm going to do this mitzvah, but here's what I want back. And then sometimes not only do we not get what we want, but it gets worse. Then we're like, God, wait a minute. I did all that stuff. But the point is the world that we live in, right? It's not frictionless. There's still a little bit of friction. There's still a little bit of disconnect, which means, and let me explain to you the way the Kabbalists explain it. And we've shared this from previous classes. So if you've heard this before, this is going to be a reminder. When we pray, for example, so prayer, we believe, elicits blessings, but sometimes those blessings don't hit us. And the question is, why not? So the way Kabbalah explains this is that the blessings go into our bank account. But sometimes, so they're in the bank account, but it's possible that we might not be able to withdraw it from the ATM. There's a difference between the funds being transferred to the account and then us withdrawing it from the ATM. There's two different things. Are you with me? So the funds are going into our account. They're always going into the account. Spiritually, it's happening. The The question is if physically, if there's a gap between the money in the account and the money in my pocket. And that's where there could be some friction. Now, this is not to dissuade us or discourage us from doing a mitzvah. This is not to say, well, there's no point because it may not work anyway. That's not, first of all, as Linda said, you should do it anyway because it's the right thing. Praying to God is right because it's right. A mitzvah is right because it's right. Studying Torah is right because it's right. So like we say in Pirkei Avos, don't be like those servants who only serve their master to get a reward. Rather, you should be like the servant who serves the master, not to receive the reward, but because the master is awesome. So you serve the source, you serve God, not because of what you get out of it, but because of this. But how do you explain that in God's world, things don't always sync? The answer is because we're dealing with a world that is imperfect and not always congruent. There's sometimes a little bit of friction. There's sometimes a little bit of a delay. So sometimes it's not going to work today, not work. It's sometimes you're not going to see it today, but you may see it tomorrow or the next day or the next year. It may take a whole lifetime to then look back and say, I see now how it might take the afterlife to see how everything made sense. But one thing we know is that the true reality is not the one that we see. And that gets back to today's class. The true reality is not what we see with our eyes, because that's a bit of a broken reality. The true reality is not the moon that we see. The true reality is when Rosh Chodesh really is. The true reality is the spiritual reality. And that's where our efforts are best trained. So in conclusion, today we learned about the moon, more than you perhaps thought that you needed to know about the process of Kiddush HaChodesh, which is the sanctification of the moon and the new month. We learned, just to recap, I'm going to do a 60-second recap, so that, to which point you'll say, why do we have a 60-minute class if we do it in 60 seconds? I don't have a good answer for that, but here's the recap. I'm kidding. It only works if you have the whole class. But here's the quick version of this. There's a tachlis. Before plague number 10, God shares with Moses the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. And God says, when the moon looks like this, you sanctify it. And that's the way the courts did it for 1,000 years plus. You had witnesses that came to the court and said, we saw it, and they got cross-examined. And then the Beis Din said that the court said, Chodesh, it's Rosh Chodesh. What happens if the court gets it wrong? In an interesting halachic twist, we keep it with what they proclaimed, even though based on our calculations on paper, it doesn't seem like it works. The question that the Rebbe asks, that we ask, is why not correct the mistake? Why leave it as a mistake? And the Rebbe answers in a very interesting analysis, saying through an elaborate conversation about Nisan and Tishrei and whatever, basically that there's two realities. There's the spiritual reality and our reality. And which one is truer and more perfect? The spiritual reality. Ours is a bit flawed. So therefore, it makes sense that sometimes what's true is not always going to trickle down into the astronomical charts. So when the court calls it Rosh Chodesh, it really was Rosh Chodesh. The fact that the moon wasn't ready is the moon's issue, but that's not Rosh Chodesh's issue, because Rosh Chodesh is a divine ordainment, and that the court got right. And the message for us is we can't always look at what's going on around us to be the arbiter. I think that's the right word, to be the decider of what truth is. Because this is not true. So if we say, well, this worked out and this didn't, so let me do this all the time, right? Cheating prospered and honesty got me in trouble, right? So I'm not making any money being honest, but I can make money this way. So then let me go, what makes sense on the ground, that may not be true, because what's on the ground is not always true. We have to align ourselves with the higher values, with the truth of Hashem, with the ideal, and not always with what's real. Of course. Our mission is to align the two, to do our best to align the two, to take that which is out of alignment and make it aligned, to take our lives and bring them closer up to the source, closer, connect with God, to take the stuff around us and show its connection with the divine. And we're longer than 30 seconds, and I get it, but that's the idea. The idea is tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means to fix the world. If it was perfect, we would need to fix it. The message is tikkun implies imperfection. The world is imperfect. That's where we come in. And that means when the world looks like it rewards dishonesty, be honest anyway. When the world looks like it rewards, right? It rewards cutting corners, don't cut corners, right? Why? Because we're doing what's right and not right. What's right and not what's right now, feeling good. It's what's really right and not what's immediate looks like to our benefit. And it's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. This is a lifetime of work, and it's not just about cheating and business or whatever. It's an easy, it's low-hanging fruit example. It's about everything in life. It's everything in life is about aligning it with its true purpose, aligning it with something higher, and not just keeping it disconnected. When we eat, famous Hasidic teaching, when we eat, it should be for a higher purpose, not just for physical gratification, because that's a disconnected experience. We don't want to have disconnected. We want to have connected experiences. And connected experience means when we're eating and aligning it with our soul. So that's today's class. Today's class is all about recognizing the flaws in our reality, the perfection in the divine reality, and encouraging us, motivating us to look a little bit more at what the truth is and not what's here on the ground. Thank you very much for joining me for Torah study. I hope this made sense. Number one, I hope this was inspiring, and I hope you took away some practical lessons. All right, we'll open this up for questions. Let's start around here, around the table. Questions, comments.
Yeah, like
Sandrine.
you said, I remember last Shabbat that you said, the Rosh Chodesh would be at 2:32
Yeah.
in the morning. So
Yeah.
what is that?
That's the molid. That's exactly what we're talking about. So first of all, it was 2:23. Last, no. Listen. No, very good. So I was actually thinking in preparing this class, like, should I break out the calendar and go through the times? I'm like, no, it's gonna make it more complicated. It was still complicated. It was still it's not something we can cover without like really, but here's what happened. This week, Sunday night. Early Monday morning. This week, early Monday morning at 2:23 a.m. Monday morning in Jerusalem time, not Atlanta, not Eastern Standard Time, in Israel, Jerusalem time, at 2:23 over Jerusalem. That's when that first crescent of the moon appeared. How do I know this? Because we got the calculations, because we know it, right? I read it in the calendar. So that's how I know it practically, but it's known. 2:23 a.m. Monday morning, this a few days ago, Monday morning, 2 days ago. Today's Wednesday, I think, still Wednesday. Seems like a long week, whatever.
Yeah.
Two days ago in the morning, 2:23 a.m., Monday morning in Jerusalem, the moon appeared. So guess what? Monday was Rosh Chodesh. And you know this month, you know what happened this month? Listen to this, Shvat, but it was the 30th day, which means that it was day one, which means that the previous month of Tevet only had 29 days. The previous month, this is real time. Previous month of Tevet, we're in Shvat now, third day of Shvat. The Tevet had 29 days because day 30 was day one because the new moon already appears. Now we know this, we didn't have to wait for witness testimony because we know based on the calculation. So what was your question? I don't know if I'm answering the question.
And are we supposed to do something at that time?
At 2:23?
Yeah.
Sleep.
No, that's serious.
No.
So we're still awake.
So we're still awake because the night before,
Where?
I've never seen anything to align on that level. Look, the days are Chodesh. We know in advance.
Go out, look at the moon.
Go out, look at the moon, howl at it a few times. No, because Shavana you do afterwards, a few days afterwards, once it's a little bit bigger. No, we don't. I've never heard of a practice on that, for that specificity. But yeah, the idea is that that's when Rosh Chodesh is. And if the court gets it wrong back in the day, they got it right. But yeah.
Rabbi Sollish?
Hold on, Sarah, 1 second. Elio's going to go, and then we'll jump to you.
There's 2 months that don't always have. It fluctuates between 29 and 30 days.
Right. I don't remember. 2 of the months either could have 29 or 30 days. Some of the months are set as to which one they are. Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember which ones, but it's a thing. Sarah, jump in.
Is this conversation related to the Torah saying that when Hashem created the world, he made something from nothing, nothing meaning him.
Right.
And the Jew's job is to take the something and return it to the nothing, to the.
I like that.
Is that related to what we're talking about tonight?
I would say, yeah. I would say God created something from nothing. In other words, physicality from spirituality. Or to put it in other terms, God made the spiritual physical, and our job is to make the physical spiritual. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it. Our job is to undo the imperfection and get back to the perfection, but not by escaping. And that's why I kind of subtly alluded to that, not by running away from this world, but by fixing it. Tikkun means repair, not running away, but fixing it, aligning it. In this context, aligning the two realities, getting our physical reality a little bit closer to that spiritual ideal. Not to run away and say, well, let me go to heaven where it's perfect, but by aligning it more through our actions. Yeah.
Rabbi Ari.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a huge amount of problem with the Sivan and Tishrei.
Nissan.
Nissan. It's close. Nissan and Tishrei. Because I looked in my Rosh sheet, and this is the simple meaning. No commentary, no Zohar, I'm sorry, none of that. And Hashem said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this is Torah, saying, this month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be for you the first of the months of the year. This is not like you need a sign between your eye, on your hand, between your eyes. And what does that mean? And we need Talmud, the oral law to tell us. We don't need oral law to tell us. This is the simple meaning, is obvious, saying this is the first of the months of the year. So therefore,
Nissan is number one.
Tishrei should not be the New Year, Jewish New Year. It should be Sivan.
Nissan.
Or Nissan. I keep Nissan. I'm sorry. Yeah, Nissan.
Good. Right. So when the Torah says this is the first month of the year, doesn't mean that it's not Rosh Hashanah, because the same Torah says in the book of Deuteronomy and in Leviticus, it says there that on the 7th month, on the first day of the 7th month, you shall celebrate Rosh Hashanah. So you can't undo what we know as far as the observance of the holidays. So you and I are not going to undo this now based on our analysis. It's the Torah itself says day 1 of month 7 is Rosh Hashanah. So that's what it says. Day of the shofar sounding. That's exactly what we do on Rosh Hashanah. At the same time, it does call this month the first month. So what does it mean? That's why the Talmud has a debate. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he says Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah is the first month. According to Rabbi Yeshua, no, this is the first month. To which Tosfos says, the grandson of Rashi, Rabbi Tam says that there's two firsts. There's concept and there's perfection and there's creation. There's concept and there's implementation. Two different firsts. And that's the key. That's the catalyst of this whole class, this whole conversation. There are two firsts. There's two realities. There's a reality of blueprint and a reality of construction. Two different worlds. So the blueprint reality, right? That's created Nisan. That's the first month. And maybe when God says to Moses, this is the first month, the message is not this is when it began, not when it unfolds in perfection, but this is the goal. This is the ideal. Remember, even as you celebrate the beginning of creation, remember what the purpose is. Never take your eye off the prize. In other words, Mark, I'm agreeing with you, but understanding it as a hybrid, not that it's an either or, and that's the whole big idea, the mind-blowing idea of Tosfot, which is not Kabbalah. Tosfot is Tosfot. The whole Tosfot idea is that it's not an either or, either this or that. It's not Nisan or Tishrei, it's both. It's Nisan and Tishrei. Tishrei is the birth of imperfection. Nisan is the birth of perfection. And the goal is to align the two. Not the goal. Our work, our job is to align the two, try to align the two. And that's why we're here. But yeah, you're correct. The fact that God tells Moses, this is the first of the months of the year, that lends credence to what Rabbi Yeshua says. And Nisan is the first of the month, is the beginning of the origin of creation, because that's what first means, beginning. But Rabbi Eliezer says no, and we know that it's halakhically it's not. So what does Rabbi Yeshua mean, and how is he right? So that's where Tosfot comes in. So that's the hybrid. Yeah.
Could I just add something?
Sure, absolutely.
It's just, this is going back in history a little bit, but when King George died, his daughter became queen. That wasn't her coronation. Her coronation was later. She became queen. She was the Queen of England. The regency went from her father to her automatically. There was no gap. But when she was the coronation ceremony, which is Rosh Hashanah, Lahavdil, I mean, really, that's when we crown Hashem our King, was later. So if we could just take an example from that, if that helps you, Mark.
Yeah, it's
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Excellent.
It's just because I like the royal family.
Could I chime in with a comment, please?
Absolutely, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know that certain Yom Tovs cannot occur on certain days. For instance, I'm looking at my Yom Kippur Maksur, and the prayer for the day, there's one for Monday, one for Wednesday, one for Thursday, and one for Shabbos. And so the calendar is designed so that Yom Kippur will not be on certain weekdays. But what happens when the court gets it wrong?
That's a good question. I'm not, there's a lot of discussion in the Talmud about, back in the day, could these holidays have fallen out on days that we consider to be less desirable, or was it also somehow done in a way where that was circumvented? I don't recall the answer. I know it's discussed. You're asking a very good question. I know it's discussed. I don't remember the exact answer on that. But it's worthwhile to look into. It's in Talmud and then the commentaries, but I don't have that. I don't have the conversation fresh in my mind, so I don't want to jump in on it and say either way. But you're absolutely right. The phrase in halachic terminology is lo adu rosh, which means Rosh Hashanah cannot be adu. Bit adu, no. In Hebrew, adu. Aleph, Dalet, Vav. Aleph is 1, Sunday. Rosh Hashanah cannot fall on Sunday. First day of Rosh Hashanah cannot be Sunday. Dalet is day 4, Wednesday. And Vav, which is Friday, day 6, Friday. Lo adu Rosh. Rosh Hashanah cannot fall out. First day, Rosh Hashanah cannot be on a Sunday, on a Wednesday, the first day, and on a Friday. That doesn't mean the second day can't. It just means the first day can't fall out on those. And because of that, Kippur can't fall out on certain days, and other holidays, and Passover and Purim cannot fall out on certain days. It's a very elaborate. When Hillel II did the calendar, he took in all of these factors into consideration. As to your question, when it was done based on witness testimony, could they have messed it up? Was there an escape hatch? How to unmess it up? It's a very good question. We have to look that up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The Torah is the.
No, hold on. People have to run. So I want to make a quick announcement. I'll get to your question, but let me make a quick announcement.
It's very quick.
Quick announcement. That's fine. A quick announcement is like this. We have a lot of upcoming opportunities. So next week, let's speak about next week for a second. We have looks like we're going to do a Rosh Chodesh Society class on Monday. We have another class on Monday also, which is how to think like a Hasidic master. So we have how to think like a Hasidic master, Rosh Chodesh Society. We have Rabbi Label Wolf, Mastering Our New World, live event. He'll be live from Melbourne, Australia. It's an online event. We have also, so that's coming up next week. Those are new things. Then we have the following week, which is unannounced, as of yet unannounced. Sunday, December 16th. Save the date. Not December, Sunday, January 16th. We have a Tu B'Shvat tree planting event. Tu B'Shvat outdoor tree planting event in Hammond Park in Sandy Springs. An email will go out at some point about this. It's, we got bumper to bumper stuff over here. So that's happening on the 16th. If you want to be part of it, you can let me know. You don't have to wait for the email. You can just email me or text me and let me know, and we'll get you in on that. We're putting together a group to plant some trees in honor of Tu B'Shvat. Then on that Tuesday, which is the 18th of January, we have a concert event, which is going to be fabulous. Join us for a Hasidic musical concert of Hasidic music and the story that the songs tell, the 18th of January. The following we have the brand new JLI course called Meditation from Sinai, all about spirituality meditation. And on the 28th, we have a special Shabbat birthday dinner for me, that everyone's invited to. If you didn't get information about that, let me know and I'll send you an invite. Otherwise, I hope you can make it. It's at the end of the month. So hopefully by then, we got a few weeks. So if things are shaking, I figure when you plan when things are calm, by the time it hits, it's not calm. If you plan when things are here, then hopefully by that point it goes down. That's my theory. And we'll see if it works. If not, whatever it is. But it's January 28th for that Shabbos dinner. So save the date. Keep it in mind. Even if now you're like, oh, that's not going to work. Keep it in mind. Don't throw it out too fast. Keep it in mind. Let's see how things go out over the next 4 weeks. All right. I think yes.
Ray was asking if there's a book you can order.
Oh, Ray's asking about a book. Yes, the answer is yes. There is a book. This is the teacher's edition, but there is a book. It's on Amazon. If anybody wants the Amazon link, here's what you can do. You can either look at the email that we sent this morning at 8 a.m. We sent an email with the Torah studies preview, which has a link to the Amazon. If you don't have that or whatever it is, send me an email, rabbi@intown.org, and I will send you the link to order it on Amazon. It will deliver to your house, and that's how you get the book. That's it. Easiest way. Order it. If you have Prime, in a day or two, it arrives, and you're golden. All right, so that's what's coming up. I have five things that I mentioned, maybe 6 things. I don't remember anymore. Maybe 6 things. We have Rosh Chodesh Society, how to train your dragon. I'm kidding. How to think like a Hasidic master. We have mastering your inner world with Rabbi Wolf. That's 3. Then we have Tu B'Shvat tree planting. We have the concert event. Oh, we have 7. Then we have the JLI course, meditation from Sinai, and the Shabbat dinner to boot. 7 events. Some in person, some online, some both. Tree planting will not be online. Shabbat dinner will not be online. Anyway, you look on the website. It usually has like a little slash through ribbon that tells you how to find it. If you're confused as to what's coming up, so am I. I'm kidding. I'm not confused, but go to the website. It should be fairly straightforward. IntownJewishAcademy.org and select the box that says all of the above. I'm kidding. There's no box. You just have to go through each one and check it out. I know we should have an all the above box, but whatever. We don't. So in the meantime, you just got to check it out. All right. It's very late, Mom. We'll speak on the phone afterwards, if that's okay.
My question was only, when did Hashem make the blueprint? When did Hashem make the Torah?
This is a good question. Sometime before the world. It says in the Talmud, 2,000 years before the world was created. That's when the Torah emerged. 2,000 years. But then the question's asked. How do you have 2,000 years before the world is created? How do you get 2,000? If it's before the world is created, then it's before time. So how do you get 2,000 years before time? How do you measure 2,000? I don't know, but that's what it says. Alpayim shana kadma Torah la'olam. 2,000 years, the Torah preceded the world. How we figure that out is anyone's guess. All right, we'll see y'all Laila Tov. We're going to let everybody go. See you later. Don't forget to join us for the upcomings, and we'll continue learning.